Nothing good can ever come from being so bad. Thus, in about 26 seconds, the nasty and insane T-Boo Tomensky will be killed when a bomb comes crashing through his cell roof. Poppy was seldom poorly behaved at school. However, when she was, her teacher would send her to spend detention in the morgue. This was the first time Poppy set her eyes upon the nasty and insane, and now dead, T-Boo Tomensky, but it would not be the last. So you see, Poppy was acquainted with the dead long before my story really begins. Sometimes Poppy would have nightmares that hungry wolves were outside her window, waiting to drag her father, a candlestick maker, away into the foreboding darkness. When she woke up in tears, her father would sit on the bed and comfort her in his arms. At these moments with her father, the feelings inside Poppy were shiny and golden. The last Christmas that they were together, he presented to her a snow globe. The town portrayed inside the globe was unfamiliar, but Poppy cherished the inexpensive and heartfelt gift because it came from her beloved father. Too much of the time, people have to do what they don't want to do. The same was true of Poppy's father, Papa Oates. He preferred going to the shore and catching moths in jars with his daughter. He did not want to leave her and go and fight in the war, but he was given very little choice. As they stared across the frozen water together, Papa Oates gave his only child a very special candle. He promised Poppy that as long as the candle burnt brightly, he would return to her. And then he went to war. Day after day the world tore itself apart with explosions, but day after day the candle burnt brightly. And day after day Poppy would look out of the window awaiting her father's return from the war. And day after day nobody came. And then one day the candle flame died. Poppy's heart broke for her loss. The pain tied knots in her tummy and numbed her from her toes to the very last hair on her head. The feelings inside Poppy turned rusty and copper. Do you know that disappointed feeling you get when you are excitedly expecting someone? You hear a knock on the door, and you run to answer it only to find out that it is somebody else. Poppy knew her father was not coming home, but she still expected him to knock on the door. One day, Poppy heard knocking, but this knocking was not from her father, but rather from her evil Uncle Bowleg. He was a bitter and twisted clown who hated children. He had run away from the circus for reasons that I will later reveal. He had come to take care of the orphaned Poppy. By take care, I really mean that he would force Poppy to do a never-ending list of chores each day. If the list was not completed, and it never was because it was never-ending, she would have to spend the night in a cage above a swamp as her punishment. Because her uncle was cruel and made Poppy spend every night in a cage above a swamp, Poppy did not really warm to him. And due to his bitterness and, dare I say it, contempt for any person younger than the age of 12, evil Uncle Bowleg did not warm to his niece. Poppy and a curious crow with a strange scar across its chest would spend the long winter nights sharing the pine cones Poppy could reach as their dinner. Christmas gifts, no matter how small, are always appreciated. So, when evil Uncle Bowleg allowed Poppy to spend the night in her own bed on Christmas Eve, the tears in her eyes dried, if only for a little while. This random act of kindness from Bowleg was confusing and could have been caused by a number of things. Perhaps too much vodka had thawed his icy heart, or perhaps the fish fingers he had for lunch were irritating his bowels, and thus locking Poppy in a cage was too much effort. It is a mystery. You may not know, but all wishes made on Christmas Eve come true if you really mean them. And so, on that Christmas Eve, Poppy made a wish to travel to the land of the dead to spend just one more moment with her father. And then she slept. And as she slept, her bed was dragged out of war-torn Eastern Europe and down, down, down into the land of the dead. Have you ever woken up in an unfamiliar place when it takes you a few moments to adjust to your new surroundings? This is how Poppy felt when she awoke. It is like when you wake up and can't quite make out a shape, so you squint until your mind can make sense of it. Poppy looked across the land of the dead and saw tired old souls, perhaps whispers of people, wandering and drifting across the bleak and washed-out landscape. Everything seemed to move slower, and the air smelt old and forgotten. The buildings looked exhausted, yet familiar. Poppy also noticed a familiar face as she walked past the pale gallows tree. The crow with a curious scar was perched upon a branch. Poppy asked the crow if, just by chance, he knew where her father was. It bowed its head slightly in a small sign of agreement, and then slowly flapped its crooked wings and set off. Poppy followed closely behind.